All right, so get this. You sent in this video clip
Uh-huh.
about some pretty wild claims Donald Trump is making about the Panama Canal. And, well, let's just say things aren't quite as they seem.
Yeah.
We're talking Chinese soldiers, sneaky takeovers, and some serious questions about what's really going on down in Panama.
Well, what's really fascinating about this is that we're dealing with a lot of assumptions and perceptions that don't necessarily align with the facts on the ground. So it's crucial to dissect these claims and, really understand the complex geopolitical and economic realities at play here.
Okay, so first up, Trump is saying Chinese soldiers are running the Panama Canal.
Right.
I mean, come on, right?
Yeah.
But this expert, Jorge Luis Quijano, who actually ran the Panama Canal, calls this out as completely false.
Yeah.
No Chinese involvement for the past 25 years.
And what's interesting about that is you have to wonder if this were true, wouldn't someone have noticed before now? It really highlights how quickly misinformation can spread.
Yeah.
Especially when it plays into existing anxieties about China's global influence.
It does make you wonder about the motivation behind these claims.
Exactly.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
But okay, let's move on to another one.
Okay.
Trump is making a big deal about China's Hutchison ports operating at both ends of the canal. So is this the smoking gun that proves China is taking over?
Well, it's true that Hutchison Ports operates terminals at the canal's entry and exit points.
Okay.
But, and this is important, they lease these ports from the Panama Maritime Authority, which is a separate entity from the Panama Canal Authority.
Right.
So it's not like China has free reign over these ports.
Okay, but are they at least calling the shots on who gets in and out?
Not even close.
Oh.
The Panama Canal itself controls access to these ports.
Okay.
They decide which ships enter, further demonstrating their authority over the canal's operations. You really have to look past the headlines and see who's actually in control here.
So no backdoor Chinese takeover then?
No, not at all.
Okay.
In fact, if you look at the bigger picture, the U.S. is still Panama's largest trading partner by far.
Really?
Something like 70% of canal traffic is related to U.S. trade.
Wow.
So if anyone's benefiting from the canal, it's still largely the U.S.
That's a pretty big reality check.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder why that point isn't getting more attention, right?
Right.
Okay, let's dig into another claim.
All right.
Trump is saying U.S. ships are getting hit with unfair, exorbitant tolls to use the canal. Is there any truth to that?
The expert is crystal clear on this one.
Okay.
The Panama Canal has a transparent, standardized toll system that applies equally to all nations. Tolls are based on the size and type of ship, not which country it's from.
So no special treatment or penalties for anyone?
Exactly.
Right.
And, this claim also kind of ignores the fact that most shipping companies these days aren't even U.S. owned.
Right.
So even if there were preferential tolls, it wouldn't necessarily benefit U.S. businesses.
Okay, so we've debunked a few claims so far.
Yeah, we have.
But this next one is where things get really interesting and a bit concerning, to be honest.
Okay.
We're talking about the U.S. right to intervene militarily to defend the canal's neutrality.
Right.
There's a lot of historical baggage here, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The expert makes it clear that this right only applies in very specific extreme situations.
Okay.
Like if a third party seizes the canal or it's no longer operational. We're not talking about intervening just because someone disagrees with Panama's policies.
So it's not a blank check for the U.S. to step in whenever they feel like it?
No, it's far more nuanced than that.
Okay.
And keep in mind the canal has been operating continuously.
Yeah.
Even during times of drought or other challenges.
Right.
The expert is pretty firm on this.
Yeah.
There's zero justification for intervention under the current circumstances.
Okay.
The treaty is clear.
But is this just Panama saying that, or do other countries agree?
Actually, there's international support for Panama's stance.
Really?
Germany, for example, has explicitly backed them up on this. It shows that the canal's neutrality is a global concern, not just a bilateral issue between the U.S. and Panama.
All right, let's zoom out for a second and talk about the Panama Canal's role in the global trade scene.
Okay.
It's obviously a crucial waterway, but is it a monopoly? Does it have all the power?
You might be surprised to hear this.
Okay.
But the expert says no, the Panama Canal is not a monopoly.
Really?
It's strategically important, yes.
Right.
But there are alternative routes for shipping goods.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like what? I'm curious.
Well, for one, you could ship goods to the U.S. West Coast and then use rail transport to get them across the country. The Suez Canal is another option, though it's had its own issues with blockages.
Yeah.
And then there are longer, less cost-effective routes, like going around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa.
Right.
So there are definitely choices out there.
So even with the recent expansion, the Panama Canal isn't invincible.
Right.
It still has to compete.
That's right.
Wow.
And this competition might even intensify as global trade patterns shift. Plus, there's another factor that could shake things up: the environment.
Oh, right? Yeah.
You see, the Panama Canal relies heavily on fresh water, and climate change is putting a real strain on those resources.
That's right.
Yeah.
This other expert, Eduardo Segarra, who specializes in water issues, mentioned that 2023 was a tough year for the canal because of low water levels.
Yeah.
Fewer ships could pass through, and the tolls went up.
Exactly. It's basic supply and demand.
Right.
When the supply of something essential, like water, decreases, the price goes up. And that raises a big question. How will the Panama Canal adapt to this challenge?
I mean, it's like they're facing a perfect storm, political pressure, economic competition.
Yeah.
And now environmental uncertainty. Talk about a tightrope walk.
And navigating that storm will require some ingenuity and maybe some tough choices.
Right.
They might need to invest in water management systems, find new water sources, or even change their toll structure to reflect the scarcity of water.
It really highlights how even something as seemingly permanent as the Panama Canal isn't immune to change.
Right.
But let's circle back to Trump's motivations for a second.
Okay.
If he's not seriously considering military action and renegotiating tolls seems unlikely, then what's his end game here?
Well, one possibility is that he's playing to his base. Tapping into anxieties about China and appealing to a sense of nostalgia for a time when the U.S. had unquestioned global dominance.
So it's more about symbolism than substance.
Yeah.
A way to project strength on the world stage.
That's one interpretation.
Okay.
But we also have to consider that he might be using this as a distraction from domestic issues, or even as leverage in other negotiations.
Right.
Maybe ones that have nothing to do with the Panama Canal.
Right.
It wouldn't be the first time he's used that kind of tactic.
It's like a big geopolitical chess game with moves happening on multiple levels.
Right.
And we're only seeing a fraction of the board.
Exactly. But even with this limited view,
Yeah.
we've uncovered some important truths.
Yeah.
The Panama Canal is not a relic of the past. It's still a vital artery of global commerce, connecting economies and keeping goods flowing.
And importantly, it's under Panamanian control.
Right.
Not Chinese control, despite what some people might claim.
Right. And even with challenges from climate change and competition from alternative routes, the canal is adapting and evolving to stay relevant in the 21st century.
Plus, let's not forget the economic impact it has on Panama.
Yeah.
It's a huge source of revenue for their government and supports their local economy.
Absolutely. But beyond the economics and logistics, this story also highlights the importance of diplomacy.
Right.
International cooperation and respecting national sovereignty.
Especially now when global power dynamics are shifting.
Right.
And competition for resources and influence is heating up.
It's a good reminder that dialogue, understanding, and finding common ground are more important than ever. And speaking of understanding that, brings us to another crucial takeaway from this deep dive.
Okay.
The need for media literacy. You have to be able to critically evaluate information.
Right.
Especially in this age of misinformation and political spin.
So it's all about being your own fact checker.
Yeah.
Don't just take things at face value, especially when they come from sources that have a history of making misleading statements.
Exactly. Seek out diverse perspectives.
Right.
Consult reliable sources, and most importantly, be willing to question your own assumptions. That's what informed citizenship looks like in the digital age.
And you know, that's really what we're all about here on the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
Giving you the tools and insights to think critically, ask tough questions, and form your own conclusions based on evidence and solid analysis. Because at the end of the day, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
But only if you know what to do with it.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely. And with that in mind, let's shift gears and look at what this all means for you, the listener.
Okay.
How can you apply these insights to your own life, your decisions, your understanding of the world?
We've thrown a lot of information at you, but what really resonates with you.
Right.
What questions does it raise? Does it challenge any of your existing views?
We want you to think about those questions as we wrap up this part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Because in the end, the most valuable knowledge is the kind that transforms us.
Right.
Expands our horizons and makes us more engaged and informed citizens.
Speaking of transformation,
yeah,
there's one final twist to this story we haven't even touched on yet.
Oh.
One that might just blow your mind.
Okay, I'm ready. So we've been talking about all the political drama surrounding the Panama Canal.
Yeah.
But remember that environmental uncertainty we touched on?
Yeah.
That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah, it's almost like a hidden layer to this whole story. On the one hand, you've got Trump making all this noise about China, but on the other hand,
right,
you've got this very real threat to the canal's future from climate change.
It's like a ticking time bomb, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it really raises the question, who's actually thinking about the long-term sustainability of the canal?
Well, the expert we heard from Eduardo Segarra, he made it clear that water scarcity is a growing concern. He said that 2023 was a particularly bad year. With low water levels in the lake that feeds the canal, fewer ships could get through.
Right.
And the tolls went up.
It all comes back to that supply and demand principle. You know,
right.
When the supply of something essential, like water, decreases, the price goes up.
Yeah.
And that has big implications for the canal's long-term viability.
So it's not just about political maneuvering and economic competition.
Right.
It's also about the environment. And it seems like Panama's the one caught in the middle of all this.
Exactly. And it begs the question, what can they do about it? How do they adapt to these evolving challenges?
Right.
And ensure the canal's future in a world increasingly affected by climate change?
I mean, are we talking about some kind of massive engineering project?
Hmm.
Or are there simpler solutions?
Well, there are a few options on the table.
Okay.
They might need to invest in water management systems, explore alternative sources of water, or even adjust the toll structure to reflect the scarcity of this vital resource.
So they've got some tough choices to make, but honestly, after hearing all this, I'm even more skeptical of Trump's motivations.
Yeah.
It's like he's completely ignoring the environmental issues and just focusing on this China narrative. It just doesn't add up.
You have to wonder if he's deliberately trying to distract from the real issues, you know? Or maybe he's trying to create a sense of urgency to justify some kind of intervention.
It's all very cloak and dagger, isn't it?
It is.
But let's try to get back to Trump's supposed endgame for a second. If he's not seriously considering military action and renegotiating tolls seems unlikely, then what's he really after?
Well, one possibility is that he's trying to appeal to a certain segment of his base.
Okay.
Those who are wary of China's rising global influence and who view the Panama Canal through the lens of historical U.S. dominance.
Right.
It's a way of tapping into that "Make America Great Again" sentiment, even if it means distorting the facts.
So it's more about symbolism and nostalgia than actual policy.
That's one way to look at it.
Okay.
He's creating a narrative that resonates with his supporters, even if it doesn't necessarily reflect the reality on the ground. But we also have to consider the possibility that he's using this as leverage in other negotiations, maybe totally unrelated to the Panama Canal. He's known for his unpredictable tactics.
It's like he's playing 4D chess while everyone else is still trying to figure out checkers.
Right.
But even with all the uncertainty surrounding Trump's motives, this deep dive has uncovered some important truths, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. We've learned that the Panama Canal isn't some forgotten relic of the past.
Right.
It's still a vital artery of global commerce, connecting economies and facilitating the flow of goods around the world.
And it's crucial to remember that the canal is under Panamanian control.
Right.
Managed and operated by Panamanians.
Yes.
Not by China or any other foreign power. They're the ones facing these challenges head on.
Right. And despite those challenges, from climate change to competition from alternative routes, they're adapting and evolving to maintain the canal's relevance in the 21st century.
Yeah, and let's not forget the economic significance of the canal for Panama.
Yeah.
It's a major source of revenue supporting government programs and fueling the local economy. It's their lifeline in many ways.
Precisely. But beyond the economic and logistical aspects, this story also highlights the importance of diplomacy, international cooperation, and respecting national sovereignty.
Right.
These are crucial principles, especially in a world where power dynamics are constantly shifting.
It's like a reminder that dialogue and understanding are essential if we want to navigate these complex global challenges.
And speaking of navigating challenges, that brings us back to the importance of media literacy, which we touched on earlier.
Right.
You, the listener, have to be your own fact checker.
Yeah.
Don't just accept everything you hear or read, especially when it comes to politically charged issues like this.
So we need to be critical thinkers.
Yes.
Right? We need to question assumptions, seek out multiple perspectives, and be wary of information that's designed to manipulate or mislead.
Exactly. And that's where the deep dive comes in. We're here to provide you with the tools and insights you need to make sense of the world, to cut through the noise, and to form your own informed opinions.
Because ultimately, knowledge is power.
Right.
But only if you know how to use it.
Exactly.
And speaking of powerful knowledge, remember that twist we mentioned earlier?
Oh, yeah.
The one might blow your mind. Well, get ready, because this is where things get really crazy. We've gone deep on the politics and the economics, even the environmental concerns surrounding the Panama Canal.
Right.
But there's one more piece to this puzzle, and it's a real head-scratcher. You see, while Trump is out there publicly bashing Panama, accusing them of cozying up to China,
right,
behind the scenes, his administration has been quietly trying to sell the Panama Canal to China.
Oh, wow.
Talk about a plot twist, right?
It's like something out of a spy movie.
It really is. According to these reports we've uncovered, Trump sees the canal as a financial burden, a relic of the past that's not worth the headache anymore.
So who better to unload it on than the very country he's accusing of already controlling it?
The irony is unbelievable.
It is.
He's accusing Panama of doing what he's secretly trying to do himself.
It really makes you question everything you thought you knew about this situation.
Absolutely. I mean, is this just a negotiating tactic to rattle Panama and get some concessions?
Right.
Or is Trump truly ready to hand over a strategically vital asset to China?
Right.
Potentially boosting their influence in the region.
And what does this say about the reliability of anything Trump says on this issue?
Right.
I mean, if he's willing to say one thing publicly while doing the complete opposite in private, how can we trust anything he says about this or any other topic for that matter?
It's like we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg here.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot going on beneath the surface, and it's probably a lot messier and more complicated than we initially thought.
This is a prime example of why deep dives like this are so important.
Right.
We get to peel back those layers, expose the contradictions, and start to understand the world in a more nuanced way.
It might not always be comfortable.
True.
But it's essential if we want to navigate this complex and ever-changing world we live in.
So what do you make of all this?
Yeah.
How do you reconcile these seemingly conflicting narratives? What conclusions do you draw about the motives and strategies of those in power?
These are questions that go way beyond the Panama Canal itself.
Right.
They're questions about trust, transparency, and the very nature of power in the global arena.
We've provided you with the information, the context, the different perspectives. Now it's up to you to connect the dots, form your own opinions, and engage with these issues in a thoughtful and informed way.
Because at the end of the day, the best defense against misinformation manipulation and those who seek to exploit complexity for their own gain is a well-informed and engaged citizenry.
So keep asking those tough questions, keep digging deeper, and keep seeking out diverse viewpoints. That's what the deep dive is all about.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep challenging the narratives that shape our world.